Hey guys, welcome back to week 3 of our Freedom series. And this week we're talking about freedom of inheritance. And if you haven't been with us the last couple weeks, we're looking through the book of Galatians and we're partnering through the whole church series in order to kind of do one series all together. The whole church does it all together in one foul swoop. So we're looking in Galatians 3 and 4 now, and we're looking at what it really means to be inheritance and have an inheritance in Christ. This is kind of one that's real important to me because I think it's one that undermines the whole message of Christianity and the whole idea of what it really means to be a follower of Jesus. So, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, you're bound by your failures. You can't measure up to the law, and this church in Galatia was really struggling with this idea of, do we follow all the Old Testament law exactly, or do we have these new freedoms and new allowances that we're allowed to do because of Christ? And how far does that go? Can we act whatever way we want and then just come asking for forgiveness from Christ? And what's this tightrope? Where's this middle ground of these two places? And Paul's trying to thread this needle and talk about this in a way that lets them know that not only are they free from the law, but they're free from living a life of sin at the same time, and they have freedom in Christ. And they also have a need for Christ, that they can't be good enough themselves. They can't measure up. They can't be ones that follow and meet all the requirements of the law to where they don't need Jesus. They needed Jesus, and Jesus came and gave them the fullness of the law. But there's also this idea of the faith in Jesus that brings us into something and brings us freedom into something, and that is really into the family of God. What Paul's talking about here is that with Christ and our acceptance of Christ, we become adopted into the family of God. We become sons and daughters of God. And this is what's so central about the message of the gospel is when you're adopted into Christ, when Christ comes and he says, "You're mine and I'm choosing you and I'm adopting you," it changes our whole identity. Our family now becomes our brothers and sisters in Christ. Since I belong to God, I now belong to the people around me as well. But not only that is, I'm known, you are known as a son and as a daughter. Think about that for a second. Whatever access that Jesus has to God, do you know that you have the same access to God? I remember reading a story once about Billy Graham. If you don't know who Billy Graham is, great evangelist, presidents, world leaders called him asking for religious advice. And one of his sons was talking about his relationship with his dad, and he said, "You know what? I knew that at any time I could go walking into my dad's office, and whoever he was talking to, whether it be the President of the United States or just the guy down the street, he would tell the guy on the phone, 'Hey, I gotta go. My son's here. I need to spend time with my son.'" And I knew that I had access to my dad beyond presidents, beyond neighbors, beyond anybody else. My dad was my guy and I could go to him. That's pretty incredible when you think about it. What's even more incredible is when we think about is the fact that you have that same access to God. There's nothing, there's no time, there's no place that your title of Son of God prohibits you from access to God. You can go to God at any time, and he's going to put aside everything else to focus on you. That's pretty incredible. You know, I remember when I was young, I would come home, and if I had a bad day at school or if I had messed up the day before, I'd be kind of tentative around my parents. You know, I'd be like, are they mad at me today? Are they not mad at me today? I kind of, messed up. I kind of blew it the day before, and where's our relationship? The great news about our relationship with God is you never have to be tentative about it. No matter how much you mess up, no matter how much you feel unworthy, no matter how much you feel like you just don't fit the bill of what God's looking for, because of Jesus' sacrifice, we're adopted into the family. And when God looks at you, he sees Jesus' sacrifice. He sees that Jesus is enough. And because of that, you can come anytime to God. Your past failures, your past mistakes, your current failures, your current mistakes, nothing can keep you from experiencing that love of God as your Father. It's this great reality that I'm identified by God. In the Old Testament or the New Testament times in the early church and the Jewish culture and tradition, when you bore your father's name or when you were known as your father's son, you had full authority for whatever the father could do. You could go down to the market and you would have the same authority as your father would down at the market, and you could buy under his name. You could conduct business under his name. You could do anything that he could do, you had access to because you bore his authority. When God comes and he says you're adopted as a son of God, you're adopted into that place, the reality is you have his full authority. And you're called to use it. You're called to be an example to everybody else around you. We could pray for the sick and see healing. We can talk to people and let them know they're loved, and we bear the authority of expressing God's love to people around us. Nothing really in that fashion, in that manner, is really off limits to you because you bear the name of God. You are known as the son and daughters of God. This week, I would just encourage you, when you go through school and you go through your days, what are the moments that you feel like you don't have it all put together? What are the moments that maybe you feel isolated and all alone? What are the moments that you even feel on top of the world and you just nailed it? What would it be like if we took those moments to Daddy God? What are those moments that we took it to God and just be like, hey, Dad, look what I did. I have a little 4-year-old and he loves bringing me his accomplishments. And Dad, are you proud of me? And there's nothing I love more than being able to tell him, man, I'm so proud of you. It's the same way with God. When God looks at you, he wants you to know he's so proud of you because you have an inheritance. You have the freedom of the inheritance as a son and daughter of God. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.